in the center of your screen, I have boundaries and expectations circled, and I have alluded to this multiple times. This is going to be the medicine part of the presentation. And I say medicine because I'm about to give y'all some tough love, and I've kind of already given it to you, so we kind of eased you in. You guys have to know your role. You are not a therapist, we know that. I know that the National Mentoring Partnership uses the word friend generally. We're not BFFs, okay? We're caring mentors and caring adults. It's very important that you know this, because even the word friend, if you think about the word friend, some of us, when we say friend, we kind of use that word real casually, because like Facebook, you're friends with like 1,000 people. You've never even met them, right? So is that the kind of friend we're talking about? Or are we talking about like the friend that you do anything and everything for? So this word friend is kind of problematic, but we're not friends. We might have some things in our relationships with these folks who feel friendshipy, but we got to know what we are and we aren't, right? So boundaries are critical in this work, because when I thought about a lot of the comments and questions that came up in our pre-call, and then I think back to all of the work that I've done, all of the training that I do, not just with people who do this work, but with people in life. One of the hardest things that people struggle with is boundaries. And when you don't have good boundaries, not good things happen. Everything in life needs a bound, right? That's why we have rules and laws. Like, if you could just go whatever speed you want, we'd be wilding out here. I'd be driving fast. I don't know about y'all, but I would be driving fast. So, right? So we have these parameters, because every good thing is good in measure, right? There's really not a thing, well, money might, I don't know. Anyway, most things need limitations, right? I would take as much money as y'all want to give me. But other than that, everything needs limitations. So we need to have boundaries, because it guides how you show up to the relationship. It prevents and minimizes transference and countertransference, which I'm going to talk about in a second. And it helps you manage emotional investment. And this is where it gets all sticky, because we get all super emotionally invested and we start forgetting what this is and isn't. And then we think we're responsible for having answers that we're not responsible for having. We think we're responsible for outcomes we're not responsible for. We think a lot of stuff, and then it gets funky. And then you don't know that it's a problem until it's a problem, right? So just a couple of things to note. We shouldn't be seeking information about personal experiences or trauma in order to build relationships. So hopefully we all know that, but just going on record. Like, so we shouldn't be like asking and trying to get deep so we can really be close. We're asking general questions to get to know people in general, but we shouldn't be going for like the really heavy, deep stuff. We should not. That's a problem, and it will show up later. It's not going to feel like a problem then. It's going to come up later. That's the problem. That's why this is hard, because when there's a boundary issue, it's not when it first started, it's later, and then it's too late to redirect. And you should always be noting to yourself and to them where the boundaries are, and that includes mandated reporting. So it shouldn't be news. Even for me as a clinician, if I sense you about to tell me, hey, listen, just want to make sure you know, we talk about this all the time. If you tell me this and this is what I got to do. I stop them before they tell me, because I want to make sure we're clear here on what it is, right? So if I see that you're getting really close to me, oh, I want you to come to my thing, and I want you to, you know what, I really appreciate you inviting me, but I just want to remind you, unfortunately, if we were in a different world and different time, my answer might be different, but there's just certain things I can and can't do. I know it's tough, but so these are things that have to always be part of your relationship and part of your conversation. Because if it isn't, then, because you guys ask a lot of questions, but how do I avoid breaking trust? How do I avoid? Well, you avoid it by never getting there in the first place as much as possible, right? So when you have boundaries, we reduce concerns about losing trust and betrayal. We reduce concerns about dealing with strong reactions to trauma, because if I am in the proper relationship with you within my bounds, and I'm not a therapist, there's less likelihood that a person is going to tell certain things if I'm showing up right. Again, I know this is generally speaking, because it just depends. Any kid could tell you anything, anytime, but it does have a lot to do with how you showed up to them up until that moment, right? So It minimizes that because this was another concern, that they would think you don't care. It minimizes whether you think you're qualified to do the work. It minimizes you struggling to close a relationship. Because if you were handling this all along the right way with boundaries, it's not going to be as hard. It's always hard when you have a good relationship with someone and you're wrapping it up. But if we were clear all along what this was, it's not going to be that hard because we always knew this was coming. Now, if you only said that at the beginning, and then now it's been 9 months and 2 years, and we just now talking about enclosure, yeah, it's going to be hard. So we missed it in the relationship along the way, right? It also minimizes vicarious trauma and secondary trauma, because when you don't have boundaries, you get so enmeshed in people's stuff that it's super heavy. You're carrying it, it's funky, and now you're stressed and you're burned out, and now you're thinking about them. Your husband's over there, you never even talk to him anymore because you're always thinking about the kid and all that stuff, right? So quick note on the transference and countertransference, because this is the thing in therapy too. This is a quote: "It can be the best of servants and the most awful of masters." So this is an image of a sort of a therapy session, but this is the case in mentoring or any other relationship. So you have the person on the left, background, abandoned by my father. I got ADHD. I was physically abused. I used marijuana. My parents were divorced. On the right, this person, and this is supposed to be the professional. My husband's cheating on me. I go to happy hour regularly. I got high anxiety. I was sexually abused as a child, and I have low self-worth. So when you see these two people come together, right? And we got all this stuff because everybody got their own lives they're coming to the relationship with. You see how lit it can get really fast. So the cool thing about transference, which all this is that relational exchange, right? Is that when me and Fran know we got something in common, that makes the relationship easier. Cause like now I could say, hey girl, cause we got that thing, right? So that's the part where it says it can be the best of servants, because that's how you build rapport and you get people to talk, and you know what I mean? You get all these great outcomes. Now, the awful master part is when me and Fran get so cool that this ain't exactly, there's no boundaries. So me and Fran hanging out, I'm thinking about Fran all the time. I want to buy her gifts. She buys me. You see what I'm saying? So now the fact that we knew we had this thing in common becomes this really messy thing, right? And it's too late then. So that's why you struggle with a closure, or that's why you feel like they're going to think that you violated their trust because you went way too deep. And then you got to this moment where you're like, oh, I shouldn't be this deep. Well, yeah, it's going to be hard to pull out now because you went so deep, deeper than you ever should have gone. I'm a therapist and I'm not supposed to go this deep. So if you're not a therapist, you definitely are not supposed to go this deep. So you guys have to know this as the folks who help mentors and sometimes work with youth directly. And you got to know this so that you make sure your mentors understand this. The boundaries are everything. And I'm telling you, when I was in school, they would tell me about boundaries and I'll be like, whatever, you don't understand relationships. So then, I was doing my own thing. I've tested this. So, and y'all know this, once you get too deep, next thing they know, they're asking you for money. And you're like, damn, how do we get here? Well, if I sat there and I was able to observe your relationship for the last 6 months, I could tell you exactly how they got to the point where they thought they could ask you for money, because that was something you facilitated in how you engaged. And then now you got there and now you like, I don't want to hurt their feelings and tell them no. But some of that is because of how you showed up. So this is the hard part, because in our minds, we want to show up and do everything we can for people. That is not your job to do every single thing that you are humanly capable of doing for every youth you work with or any youth you work with. Newsflash, this might sound harsh, but this is real. Even as a therapist, it is not my job to give every ounce of my being to every client, to any client. It's my job to be supportive. It's my job to provide direction when I can, right? It's my job to provide information. I'm not that other stuff. So I'm going to pause for a minute. Jennifer, I know you have a couple of things you want to add, and I know y'all got something to say, but this right here, it don't feel right, but I've tested it both ways. I've done it boundaryless and I've done it with boundaries. without question. And let me let y'all know, I love on the peeps like no other. Like I love on the peeps, but I'm telling you for sure, the better way for you and them is with boundaries. So Jennifer, I know you had some thoughts that you wanted to add, and then we're going to let the people speak.
Yeah, thanks, Elizabeth. So in the conversation about boundaries, you know, the impacts group has been talking about mentoring and serving youth impacted by addiction and youth with an incarcerated parent. And one topic that comes up is, you know, developing that relationship and then closing it safely and effectively, because youth are, you know, the goal is for these relationships to develop and flourish. And if that happens successfully, that then when the mentor leaves, it can leave a gap. And so we want to make sure that those closures are really happening successfully. One step I recommend all mentoring programs and clubhouses take is to examine your mentor agreement and make sure that you have a defined commitment length in that agreement, whether that's 6 months, a year, what have you. That can really help make sure that you as the program staff, the mentor, and the youth are all on the same page around how long the mentor will be in the young person's life and how they can successfully transition in and out of your program. So we have some resources on Clubhouse Connect, some template resources that you can draw from, but it does kind of help facilitate successful boundaries and expectations and closure.
Thanks, Jennifer. All right, you guys, I know somebody got something. There he is, he's in the chat now. Okay, do you think it's important that youth understand it's temporary? It is critical. It's not important, it is not an option. The youth must know that it's temporary. It's bamboozlement otherwise, right? Like any other time, if you haven't told someone from the beginning, there's no way to avoid that being harmful, other than to make it clear in the beginning. So it's not just important, it is not an option. It should always be clear that the relationship is temporary in the beginning. Never, ever is it an option.
Can I add to that, Elizabeth?
Yes.
Yeah, and you know, Elizabeth and I were talking earlier about that expectation setting, and I mentioned to her, like, I feel like one place I can really develop more resources in the future is around member onboarding to mentoring relationships. When they come into this space, I think it's a great idea to have a conversation with new youth about what the mentoring experience can look like, how they can expect mentors to come into the space and leave the space, what mentors are there for, and just kind of, you know, give them some context for what this mentoring program might look like, so they are emotionally prepared when mentors do leave the space down the road.
Yeah. Yep.
Yes. If I could jump in really quick, I love that. And I think I asked the question. My name is Taya from the Best Buy Teen Tech Center. But I asked that question because I do mentor trainings with the mentors as they come in. And I address this. I address the closure, that part, because I didn't see it being, it just felt like they just went away. You know, and I emphasize to them how important it is to, you know, reinforce the, you know, what was learned in this shared moment, in this shared experience, and kind of, you know, make sure that it's emphasized that it's closing, but in a nice way. Like I said, by looking at what they've learned together, what they've done, how far they've come, and all these factors. But I don't think that from the youth side, that's there. So for me, this makes me say, hey, you know what? We need to kind of give them a training as well that discusses these things so that they know what to expect and not to expect as well, just like kind of what you were saying, Jen, too. And so I appreciate this conversation in so many ways. Thank you, guys.
Thank you. And thank you for making sure that that's covered in the training. Tamara, are you asking about this, how this then relates if you're a permanent staff? Yeah. So,
yes.
So here's the thing. While you don't have a specific deadline or end date as a staff member with youth, you do know that at some point, because they graduated, because you left the job, because of whatever reason, there will be a time when you two aren't together anymore. So you do know that, right? You also know that in your role, there are limitations even within the relationship while you're still engaged, right? So the boundary part is not just about, hey, let's be clear, I'm only going to be around for a set amount of time. It's also, what does it look like while I am around? So you know that I care about you, and you know I'm here to support you. But there's limitations to that, and making that clear in the beginning. I'll never be able to do everything I want to do for you, right? Because I think you're awesome, you know, and you deserve the world. There are limitations that I have. I'll always, so that you can communicate that, even though you guys don't have end dates, right? You can can and should be communicating that in the beginning, because this is the thing. On the other hand, we're trying really hard to build relationship and connection, right? So if we do that without the bookend, right, then it's relationship without bound, right? So we should always be clear about what it is and isn't. A therapist said, we don't know the end date, but we do know there's going to be one. I let people know my job, if I'm a therapist, my job, if I do my job well, then that means we should not be talking anymore, because you got it, girl. So you should be getting to a point where you don't need me anymore. So I say that in the beginning, but then as we move along, I make little comments to make sure that they know, hey girl, this is a goal. You're doing great with this. You're getting closer to being able to do this on your own. Girl, one day you ain't gonna need me. Sometimes it's a casual. It's not necessarily, we're not gonna be able to talk after month 6. It's the casual way of just making sure folks know gently, right, that there are limits, as in the beginning and the end, and limits as to what this is gonna look like. So it's, girl, I would have came to your game if I could. My boss I would be in so much trouble. Sometimes I just do it like that. You know what I mean? So that they just, and you got to sprinkle them throughout, because if you only do that at the beginning, and then y'all have known them for 10 years, or your mentor's known them for 6 months, and then they just do it 6 months later, there's no way to do that without people being hurt. So that's why it's important that it's all the way throughout. Tamara, does that answer where you were going with that question?
It does. It helps. Thank you.
Yes. And you guys, this is hard. It feels funky, but the better you do it all along, the less funky it is in real life. The less you're going to be worried about those feelings of mistrust and violation and betrayal and all of that. And the less you're going to be up at night thinking about somebody where there should be a boundary, right? Alexis, I also think we should slide into a conversation about the transition from youth in our program to alumni. The boundaries shift at those times. So that sounds like some good feedback for you, Jennifer, about how you guys operate with that. Youth as they transition into alumni status. Does that make sense?
Yeah, yep. I'm going to take a note of that, copy and paste.
Okay, great.
Yeah, and hi, I'm Alexis. I'm on Tamara's team actually. And I think a lot of the times when youth become older and they transition either after a career program or they're now considered an alumni member, a lot of the times they perceive a shift in boundaries. And I think it's cool to have like a conversation around how we manage those expectations of our kids.
Good feedback. Galen, you asked about examples of indications that a boundary is being jeopardized. They can find it. That's a hard one. If you want to give me an example, but I will just reiterate this. You're not going to know that you're in trouble until you're in trouble. That's the hard part. That's why I'm really stressing. If you feel like y'all are BFs, that's my indicator, right? Like, if you're working towards becoming BFs, if you're working so hard on getting close that you're working super hard on being close, you missed it. So that's where it's like, what is my job? How close am I supposed to get? That's something that happens over I think it's almost like a muscle that you develop over time, right? It's a skill for you that is outside of each relationship. It's your skill of knowing. And it's different for each person, right? Because if you have somebody who's really hard to engage, then you're going hard at the beginning because like they barely talk or they're really like closed off, right? But if you day one meet a youth who's like spilling the beans, you need to lean way back because clearly you're not going to have to go hard, and we need to send a message that, whoa, thank you, but no, right? So it's going to depend on who they are. And in order to really know that. So the indicator really is you paying attention. How close am I? How close am I trying to get? all along, because again, if we're looking for an indicator, the real indicator is going to be if you found out that you went too far. And it's so hard because now if I see you as my BF, Galen, am I saying your name right, Galen?
Yeah, that's right.
Good. It's going to be really hard and that's when you feel horrible and you don't want to betray them. So then what you do is you don't set the boundary then either, because now you don't want to hurt their feelings. So now we go even deeper into the boundaryless relationship, right? No one's ever done this, right? And then now, so damn, when closure comes, we're screwed, right? Because we didn't want to hurt their feelings then, and we didn't want to hurt them then. And now we're so freaking deep. And, or they're doing so horribly because they're going through so much, you're sick because their trauma is now your trauma. You can't sleep and you're burnt out and you can't think about anyone else and blah, blah, blah. And then what do we do? What do I do for you in that moment? The only thing I can do is try to help you get out of it, but there's no simple answer to that because you're so deep. So does that help with your question?
Absolutely. Yeah. And, it's kind of building off Tamara's question too. It's just, kids really do confide in us and we know them for an extended period of time. There's not necessarily like a deadline as to how much time we know this person.
Yeah.
And so oftentimes they just start opening up over time. And we find ourselves in a situation where we're not clinicians, we're not therapists, but these kids are just opening up to us. So, I guess my question is like, how do you know when it's time to like make that call, get that professional involved? How do you know when it's...
Thank you for asking that. So all along, as soon as you know that somebody's dealing with stuff that therapy would be helpful for, right away, I appreciate you shared that with me. Those are the kind of things that therapists and counselors can really help with immediately. Because if you continue just to allow them to tell you and tell you and tell you, and we're 6 months into them telling you all their stuff, you have become a therapist. So you've got to at some point say, you know what, those are the kind of things that you really need to, and then maybe if they have fears about, we talked about the cultural limitations about what that means. You help them understand what therapy is. They may not say yes right away, but you continue to give them information about what it looks like. You educate them on the difference between what you do and what a therapist does. So it has to happen right away. So if they're telling you their deepest, darkest secrets, congratulations. That means you're a great relationship builder. But you better watch, because if you're loving on them too hard, once they start doing that, and there's no indication that once I told you the thing, that there's some line here, and you might not draw it exactly, but that, oh, you appreciate that I'm sharing this, but that's actually goes over there, then I'm gonna just keep going, because now I think that this is what this is. So it's an appreciation for the trust, and it's, man, you know what? Those are the kind of things that are really helpful and people can really get support on. I appreciate you sharing this. What we do here is really this part. And over there, and then they might not go tell because they think they're going to lose their relationship with you if they go do that. So you want to also confirm to them they could do both. So they can have your thing and y'all do y'all's thing and y'all help them in the way you do. And then they can do that thing with their clinician, right? So if they might have a fear that they would lose you, so you want to let them know that, hey, we can, this can all work, but we don't really do that kind of stuff here. But you deserve to have that heard and have an opportunity, not only be, because all I could do is hear you, but this person could help you do something with that. So you almost kind of put yourself like you're not as good as what somebody else would be, and that they deserve something more. So that's kind of a strategy I would use. Does that help?
Yeah, very much. Like just what you just said just makes me feel more equipped, for those situations, and I appreciate it.
I have one tiny more consideration in this, because this is all super helpful.
And
I feel like this
real quick, it's 4:01. If any of you have to go, we're going to keep recording. It's a bunch I didn't cover. Jennifer and I are going to figure out how I get to you guys the other stuff. So if you do have to go, we understand, but I don't want to cut you off, but I just want to let folks know, but we're going to record no matter what. So for those of you who have to drop. So Jennifer.
Yeah, and I think maybe we should keep a limit too. So maybe Elizabeth, if you're open to it. I know Alexis had her hand up, and then Tamara, and then I think we should wrap up. Are you open to that flow?
Sure. Go ahead. Is it Tamara?
Yes, thank
Okay.
you. I guess the only other thing I'd add here, because I feel that sometimes our team is brought to that place, like, let's go to the next level. Let's talk to somebody whose job this is, who can help you, who can go deeper. But we are in a bottleneck of mental health support here. So I have this fear that there would be no follow-up, or like where to send them that you're certain for sure. You know, like part of me was, I thought recently about a young man in our program. Part of me wants to find like a webinar about like, you know, coping with anxiety, and we could sit and watch it together or something. And in a way, it's kind of passing a boundary, right? Because I'm certainly not an expert in anxiety, but so many of the experts, as Alexis put earlier, in our community, they have a wait list of 100 kids. So what would you recommend doing while these kids are in this limbo space?
I got you. So first of all, I appreciate you being worried, but also be worried about what happens when you go too far and too deep, because that is something we're not worried about and we need to be worried about. So let's balance our worry, because there's worries on both ends. So that's one. Two, you're not a clinician, but y'all can help folks know how to, y'all can go through breathing exercises with folks. Y'all can go over using music to make yourself feel better when you're feeling some kind of way. Like, that's not therapy. So that is one of the things I had on my very last slide, which y'all aren't going to see because we're over time. But there's nothing that, like, those are things you guys can do. So you can connect them to drumming circles. You can connect them to dance classes. You can explain to them how when you're feeling some kind of way, listening to music or getting out in nature or finding a hobby you love can be helpful. You can teach them that. So it's not like we're saying there's nothing we can do because there's no counselors. You guys can definitely support folks in knowing what are, and that again, there's nothing, that's not therapeutic off limits kind of thing. So that's the answer, is y'all can do that. We're not going to go in deep about what your mama did to you, but we can talk about how music can really help you when you're feeling some kind of way. You can do that all day long. Does that help? All right, who else? Was it Jennifer you said that had?
Yeah, I think Alexis had her hand up, and then
Okay.
when I can wrap it up.
Hi there. Kind of just bouncing off of Galen and Tamara. Oftentimes, you know, we do kind of keep that professional relationship with a lot of kids, but they'll just come in and just, like you said earlier, spill the beans kind of out of nowhere. So I was wondering if you had any good redirection tips or good appropriate responses to come back at youth that come and just say something that's really, really personal and really just, you feel like it's information you should not be hearing.
Mm-hmm. My quick answer, and I think I already said this, and maybe Jennifer, remind me, maybe I can come up. What would be cool is if you guys could give me like scenarios, send those to Jennifer. Maybe I can come up with a little thing of what I would say back. But again, number one, I'm going to acknowledge what was said. Wow, I appreciate you sharing that. Thank you for trusting me. That's really, I really admire that you are in touch with your reality enough that that's even something that's on your radar, right? So definitely affirmations and thank yous. And from there, it's, you know, I want to make, something like, you know, that's something that we might want to explore, options for you to be able to kind of like work through that. It's not something that I do, unfortunately, but I'm open to, if you want, because you want to always there to be their choice, we could look at some ways in which you could have an opportunity to talk about that more. So it's sort of it's a redirect. It's kind of a soft redirect, like not, oh, can't talk about that, but it's, you know, I really appreciate you sharing. You know, those are the kind of things that really are a good fit for this or for this kind of work or that. And that's not really what we do, but here is an option, right? So that's my super quick summary of a potential way to do that. And Jennifer, maybe we can talk about some ways in which I could put something else together, but it's going to totally, it depends, but that's going to be my answer. Appreciation, acknowledgement, praise them for the fact that they're even acknowledging for themselves. And then that's not what I do, but that's going to be my answer really for most scenarios. So hopefully that at least gives you a direction to go in with that.
That's great. Thank you so much.
You're welcome.